How much do you think it costs to spend 6 weeks in Scotland and England? I did a little bit of digging on Google, and the average is anywhere from 6,000 to 16,000 US dollars for two people for 6 weeks. We are currently on a sabbatical and spent 6 weeks in Scotland and England and spent over $7,000. So in this video, we're giving you the full breakdown on how we spent that money. I'm Natalie, and welcome to my channel, Murray Out of Office. This channel documents my life along with my husband as I take a year-long career break. Yep, that's right. Earlier this year, I resigned from my job, and we're now spending the whole year focusing on travel, health, and figuring out what exactly we're going to do next. One of the things that I hear when I say that I'm on a career break is people will say, "Oh, I would love to do that, but I could never afford it. I could never afford to quit my job. I could never afford to travel for a year." So in this video and other videos, as we go along with our year-long career break, we're documenting exactly how much it cost us. And the whole thing is about transparency because, hey, it might be cheaper than you think. Now, we started our year-long career break in Germany. We went there for the Euros over the summer, and that first month cost us over $5,000. I have a full video on that, so be sure to check out exactly what our first month abroad cost us in Germany. After Germany, we've now decided to move over to the UK. Some of you may know, but my husband is from Scotland. We've been traveling to Scotland every year for the past 10 years. Sometimes Jimmy gets to go multiple times a year, and so it was always on our radar to spend a summer in Scotland. It's one of our favorite places. There's nice long days during the summer when the sun is out from very early to very late. So we always knew that we wanted to spend a good amount of our summer in Scotland and England. Now, after our first month where we spent a little bit more than I had planned or forecasted, I was really hoping that as we came into Scotland, we would come in a little bit under what we had budgeted or forecasted. However, life had other plans, so let's dive into exactly what we spent. Why 6 weeks? We started our travel halfway through the month. So we started in Germany halfway through the month. We then went to Scotland the next half of the month, and we ended up staying in Scotland and England for 6 weeks straight before we left to head to Portugal. So that will be in a future video, but we figured we'll just go ahead and share our 6-week spend. So what I'm going to do is break down the categories of our spend from the biggest category to the lowest category of spend for Scotland and England. A little bit of a surprise to me, but our biggest category of spend over these 6 weeks was transportation. We spent $1,805.66 on transportation costs between Scotland and England over the course of 6 weeks. And right off the bat, I have to fess up, I made an error in our first video about our Germany spend. I thought I had included the price of our flights to get from Stuttgart, Germany, back to Scotland in Edinburgh. However, I was wrong. That total of $5,500 did not include that. So right off the bat, we had an extra or added transportation cost that we're making up for this month, and that was $330 for our flights to get from Germany to Scotland. That includes the flights, it includes the seats, and 2 pieces of checked luggage, and it was a direct flight. So all in all, not too terrible for 2 people. We used several different forms of transportation while we were in the UK. We took a few buses, we took a few trains, but by and large, the most common way that we got around was via car. Now, since Jimmy is from Scotland, he goes back to Scotland yearly, sometimes more often. We've actually had a car in Scotland for the past few years. We are very fortunate and very grateful for Jimmy's brother that allows us to keep our car at his house. He allows us to store it on the driveway, and he even drives it around for us on occasion so that everything is in good working order. So because we already had a car in the UK, I actually thought that this was going to be one of our more affordable categories for our time, but I was wrong. First of all, you have to account for the cost of petrol when you're in the UK, and coming from the US, it is significantly more. Might be a little bit different depending on where you're coming from, but every time that we had to fill up the car, we could expect to spend around 100 US dollars. So we did a lot of traveling, we did a lot of moving to different parts of the country, we drove down to England, and so as you can imagine, that adds up. But hey, petrol, gas prices, I had planned for that. What I did not have planned for was that the car that we just bought earlier this year, a few months before we arrived in Scotland, actually had a few issues. It was going into limp mode, and so we had to take it in for diagnostics not once, but twice, and that comes at a price. And what they found is that there was a sensor that was not working properly on the car, and so we had to replace that sensor. So with the sensor, the diagnostics, we went ahead and changed out some of our wipers on the car because it's Scotland and it gets a little rainy there. Those are important. That cost us well over $1,000 for that time that we were there. So that was an expense that we did not originally plan for, but hey, it just comes with the territory of owning a vehicle. I recognize that not a lot of people are going to have their own personal car just waiting for them when they go to visit the UK. I do think it could likely cost you around $1,000 if you were to just rent a car for that same period of time. So while it was more expensive than I had planned for, it's probably right on par for what you could expect to spend for transportation. That being said, if you're staying put, if you're not moving around so much, if you're using some of the more affordable public transportations like buses, you can definitely drive those transportation costs much lower. Our second biggest cost during our 6 weeks while we were in Scotland and England was actually restaurants. We spent $1,556.46 on eating out over the course of 6 weeks, and that was slightly surprising to me as well. Now, if you're primarily staying in hotels, for example, then you would expect your spend to be much higher when it comes to dining out. We spent time with family, we stayed in Airbnbs, and so we ended up having 54 meals out while we were in Scotland and England. And of those, 10 of the meals were for 3 or more people. So like I said, Jimmy's from Scotland, and one of the amazing things about being back in Scotland is that we get to visit family. We get to go out with friends. And so there were definitely a few meals that cost us more because we were wanting to treat the people that we love and wanted to spend time with. So that's one of the reasons that the restaurant bill was a little bit higher for 2 people. Something for you to keep in mind if you're also looking at the cost for just 2 people, it should be a lot lower. There are some places where you can eat rather affordably. We frequented Weatherspoons quite a few times. If you're from the area, you know all about it. If you're not from there, then it might kind of surprise you, but there are these pubs all across the UK owned by Weatherspoons, so you get similar standard fare no matter where you go. But the prices do vary depending on exactly where you're staying. So one of our cheapest and most affordable meals out was a Weatherspoons breakfast that we had in England, and that cost us 13 US dollars. So that was like a nice fry up for Jimmy. That was a vegetarian fry up for me, and 2 drinks as well. So all in all, not terrible. Definitely one of the more affordable places that you can go for breakfast or lunch if you're looking for food that's just kind of cheap and cheerful. And you can find these in most locations in the UK, I would say. Our most expensive dinner, on the flip side, was when we stayed one night in the Dumfries area, and we were staying at a hotel. It was further out of town, lovely hotel grounds, so we decided to splurge and dine in the hotel that evening. That meal included, I want to say, a 2 or 3 course option, as well as we each had 1 drink, and that came to just over $100. So you can see that there can be quite a big range when it comes to dining out in the UK. It's really up to your budget and your taste. Next up is accommodation. And I know it's a surprise. You would almost always expect accommodation to be the most expensive part of your trip, but I'll tell you why it was a little bit lower for us. So, over these 6 weeks, we spent $1,018.84 on accommodation. And I have to tell you, our plans changed multiple times when it came to accommodation. Originally, when we were talking about taking this sabbatical, taking this career break, we talked about purchasing a property in Scotland. It's where Jimmy's from. We would love to have a permanent base there at some point. He sold his flat earlier this year so that we would have the ability to purchase just a small, simple cottage. However, that did not quite pan out. We made an offer on a place, we didn't get it, and that's when we decided to really shift gears and look at traveling more worldwide. That led us then to looking at some of the longer term rental options. And by longer term, I mean 30 days, right? We knew that we wanted to spend the summer in Scotland. And so, one of the great resources that you can look at is Airbnb and booking a monthly stay. When I tell you, I was shocked at some of the prices for Scotland. That would not be an exaggeration. Just trying to book a fairly simple accommodation for two people that had a place to park your car would range anywhere from $4,000 to $40,000 a month. And some of these places aren't even that nice. It is mind blowing. Even hotels that I found over the summer were quite expensive. Looking at the cheaper options, some of the cheapest options that we found in smaller towns that aren't that busy started around anywhere from 75 US dollars to $100. And so that quickly became a burden on us when we were thinking about spending a longer amount of time in Scotland. Because I'm not spending 10 grand on a flat for a month. There's just no way. So, luckily, Jimmy's brother and his partner came to the rescue again, and they really allowed us to stay in their house for a lot of the time. We didn't want to overstay our welcome, but they were super generous to offer up their spare room to us whenever we needed it, and we did end up taking quite a bit advantage of that. We did have 10 days of accommodation over the course of 6 weeks. So we took a trip up to Grandtown-on-Spey, and we have a video on that you should absolutely check out. We wanted to see how we felt about the area, if we felt that it was a place that we could potentially look at for properties moving forward. Up there in the Highlands, we also spent some time, as I mentioned, in England in the Lake District. We stayed at Bonus on Windermere, and then we also stayed in the lovely town of Cockermouth, which we really loved. So that included 4 nights. And I don't remember where the other two were. Oh, we stayed down in Annan and Dumfries, so a newer region for us just to check out in Scotland, and we had a few more affordable hotel days down there. And I know not everybody has a super awesome, understanding family member that will just come let them crash at their house in Scotland whenever you want it, but the other way that we managed to save a lot of money on accommodation was house sitting. We did our very first house sit down in England. We had the best time, the best host. We did a house sit where we stayed in a farmhouse that was, I think, originally built in the 1700s, and we cared for 2 geese. So, in exchange for a free place to stay in a new area for us to explore, we watched 2 Chinese geese for 12 days. And so, as you can imagine, if you're looking at accommodation that's starting at $100 a night easily, that can be quite a big savings. And so I would absolutely recommend, one, that you check out our own video on house sitting just so that you can see exactly what a day in the life looks like, but also consider that as an option for yourself. There are loads of house sitting gigs out there, especially in the UK. You can look at trustedhousesitters.com. You can look at mindmyhouse.com, which is where we did our house sit. There's uksitters.com, something like that. I'll put the link in the bio, but there are hundreds, sometimes thousands of house sitting gigs out there. The majority of them do require you to watch pets or animals because that's what people are looking for. But hey, not all of them are like that. So if you're considering spending a good amount of time in the UK and you're looking for a way to offset your accommodations, I would absolutely consider house sitting as an option. What I do want to say is that we know how fortunate we are to be able to rely on family and how much that helped our budget over this 6 weeks. I think we easily could have expected to spend another 3,000 US dollars just on accommodation if we didn't have that option available to us. We do enjoy cooking meals and prepping meals, so that brings us to our next category of spend, which is groceries. So for 6 weeks, where we were sometimes staying with family, friends, staying in an Airbnb, or maybe even just popping into the shop for a quick sandwich for lunch, we ended up spending $937.27. Since we were moving around a lot, or we were not wanting to take up too much space in my brother-in-law's house, we would end up shopping almost daily for groceries. Sometimes we would go in multiple times a day. And one, I think that's just more of the culture there. But two, it was just easier for us to kind of think about the more immediate meals and not just bulk buy. That being said, when you're going in and buying little onesie-twosie things, buying smaller amounts of things, I always think that's going to cost more. So that's something that you should be aware of when you're considering what we spent on those 6 weeks. This does also include some shopping where we took Jimmy's mom out, right? One of the things that we love and treasure when we're in Scotland is that we get to spend time with her. We can take her out for some of her bulk shopping that maybe she's not able to do for herself. So it's not a lot of money, but there are some scenarios when we're looking at how much we spent on groceries that it wasn't just for us. It was, maybe asking his mom if she needed anything or asking his brother if they needed us to bring anything back for the day. So one more thing to keep in mind. I don't have any empirical data to back this up, but for me, someone who is based in the US, I do feel like grocery shopping is typically less expensive in Scotland. And I think that's a completely subjective statement. It obviously depends on where you live, where you're from, where you're shopping when you're in the UK. But by and by, I think if I were to sit down 6 weeks of spending in the US on groceries and 6 weeks in Scotland, England, the UK, it would be more affordable in the UK. Now, if you've watched our other video on our spend, on our monthly spend breakdowns, then you know we account for everything that we have to pay for while we're on this trip, while we're away, while we're taking this career break. And so it's not only what we're spending when we're in a specific location, we also account for those general cost items that we have to maintain on a regular basis. So since this is covering a 6-week period, that cost also includes a broader general cost breakdown. And so our general cost for these 6 weeks was $868.05. What exactly does that entail? It entails our phone bill, two charges, two times, since again, it fell within a 6-week period. So we paid that phone bill. We did have a little bit more of a charge after Germany because we realized we called each other one time and we weren't on the Wi-Fi. So there was a little bit more of a charge for that, but nothing too dramatic. It also includes the cost of our monthly health insurance. So health insurance for 2 people, and that came out twice within that 6-week period. This includes the cost to store our possessions, including our car. So we paid our monthly storage cost in that 6-week period, and also my insurance car payment. So even though my car's in storage, They still recommended that I kept a little bit of coverage just in case something would happen to the storage unit itself. And so these are these little things that you always have to think about, even if you're not going to be home, right? What are the general expenses that I need to be able to cover? The last thing was Jimmy got a haircut. So right now we're considering that to be one of those general kind of upkeep costs that we have on a regular basis. Next up is activities. Now, our first month in Germany, our activities spend and budget was super low because mostly Jimmy was there to go to the football, to the Euros, and a lot of what we did was free. It was just walking around. I think we spent about $26 or $28 on activities while we were in Germany. This month it went up quite a bit. So our activity spend for 6 weeks was $525.99. And again, I think this might be one of those things that's a bit more specific to us and what we like to do. But one of my big goals was to learn how to play golf this year during this career break. I've never played golf before. I've always wanted to try it. And so this was the time. There is amazing golf in Scotland and in England. And more importantly, it's pretty darn affordable. Well, it's more affordable than what we are used to. Where we stay in Arizona, a golf game can average $200, sometimes less, definitely sometimes more. But our golf games in Scotland were ranging anywhere from $25 to $55 for two people. So I think that's quite reasonable, especially considering all the beautiful places that you get to golf. So that activities was mostly golf games or paying for a trolley to push my bag around, going to the driving range. And so that included 8 games of golf in that time period. We also had a few day trips where we drove to some places and, we had to pay for parking. This even captures the day that we went to Blackpool and, wanted to play a little bit of air hockey. So all in all, we had a lot of fun, and I do recommend checking out golf in Scotland. You don't have to go to the fancy, more well-known courses. There are loads of courses, and they can be super affordable, and often you can just show up that day and see what's available and hit the links. The next category of spend is drinks, and in this category, I'm really just counting alcoholic drinks. If you had a chance to watch the Germany cost breakdown, one of the biggest surprises to me was how much we spent that first month. And anytime you get together, some Scots and some football, it's going to cost you a little bit in drinks. So we spent over $500 that first month. We hoped to do better this time around, and we did do better. We did a little bit better, but still higher than I would like. So over the course of 6 weeks, we spent $430.54 on drinks. And actually, I just realized that I double counted some of the airport drinks we got the first month when we arrived in Scotland, so I already included them. So actually, the spend for the 6 weeks was $406.54. That included a couple of nights out for Jimmy to go out with the boys, as well as drinks before the football games. So those nights tend to add up. We did also pop into a few pubs and bars when we were on our own travels, when we were up in Granton and Spey, when we were down in Bo'ness on Windermere. I do think part of the charm is just getting to experience a pub. And for Jimmy, he loves to be able to go into a pub and strike up a conversation with people in the area. It never fails. So yes, it's more than we were hoping to spend, but it is lower than it was last month, and I do think it will continue to get lower as we get a little further away from the football games. And the last thing that we accounted for this month was shopping. Shopping included us taking my mother-in-law out for her birthday and getting her a few treats, so that's super fun and super important to spoil the ones that you love when you can. It also includes just a little bit of shopping for things like some shorts at the sports shop, We went into the pharmacy and stocked up on some toiletries and some lotions, things like that, just kind of general shopping. I also have been trying to buy little postcards everywhere we go and writing a little memory along the way. So, all in all, our shopping this month really wasn't that bad. The total was $134.10. And our revised total, when I plug in the right amount for the drinks category, comes to $7,588.03. So that is still a chunk of change to spend over the course of 6 weeks, especially when you're not paying for accommodation. What I would say is when we got to the end of this time, I felt a little bit panicky about our budget because we were spending more than I originally thought we would. That being said, we have planned to go to other more affordable locations in the second half of the year, so I think we'll be completely fine. There is just something that kind of makes you clinch a little bit when you're spending heavily up front and you're wondering, are we going to have enough to do the things we want to do and to go the places that we want to go this year? And in fact, we were spending so much that we actually decided to change locations for a little bit. So, originally, we had wanted to be in the UK for about 3 months, but we felt that it was a bit cost prohibitive and that we could have better experiences elsewhere. So, in the next video, we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about our costs for our time where we spent time in Portugal and then the remainder of our time in Scotland. I hope this was helpful. Don't count my totals. I am not the math whiz here, but I am doing this to try to be transparent, to share exactly what it costs for two people in our situation to be able to afford something like this. And I'd love to know, is that more expensive or less expensive than you thought it would be? Do you think that you could spend some of your time in the UK if you're living off of your savings? And don't forget to check out our next video where we cover the cost of Portugal and Scotland for 1 month.